Geetha Sadhana Sopaana. This is the 16th book in the English, among the English series published by Adhyatma Prakasha Karyalaya, Hole Narsipura, India. In that introductory part we have already dealt with. Today we shall enter the subject proper. Part 1, background and general considerations of this Geetha Sadhana Sopana. Steps towards implementation or achievement in Bhagavad Gita path. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. A common understanding regarding the teaching of the Gita. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as commonly understood, teaches four separate and distinct paths that all lead to the same goal of liberation. The path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. The path of meditation, Dhyana Yoga. The path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga. The path of action, Karma Yoga. In addition, the text is thought to contain a number of subsidiary disciplines or yogas, such as the process of discrimination, Buddhi Yoga, the process of controlling the mind, Raja Yoga, the process for renunciation, Sannyasa Yoga, and the process of repetitive effort, Abhyasa Yoga. On the basis of popular discourses and influenced probably by the colophons appearing at the end of each chapter in many printed versions of the Gita, some have claimed that each chapter contains one particular type of yoga. For example, the yoga of Arjuna's despondency regarding the first chapter, Sankhya Yoga in the second chapter, and so on. Some idea or word in the particular chapter seems to be the guide for such nomenclature. A well known saint has put forth the opinion that by one or all of these yogas one can attain liberation, and thereby suggesting that each one of these yogas is an independent and parallel practice for reaching the final goal. Such a concept seems to derive some support from the text itself. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, it looks as though Sankhya was taught as being different from yoga in Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, 39th shloka. And in the third chapter, the Lord Sri Krishna mentions that in the past he has dictated two paths, one for the Sankhyas, the path of Jnana Yoga, and one for the Yogis, the path of Karma Yoga. Yet in verse 6.2, we are told that what is declared as a sannyasa, know that to be yoga. In the beginning of the fifth chapter, in answer to Arjuna's question, the Lord assures him that both yoga and Sankhya lead to the same goal, and it is only the ignorant that consider the two to be different. Bhagavad Gita 5.2, 5.2 to 5. In the ninth chapter, there is the recognition of devotees who worship the Lord by constant singing, etc., and other devotees who meditate on him with knowledge, perhaps also suggesting independent paths to the goal. Again, in the 13th chapter, it is said some realize the self in the self by means of contemplation, others by Sankhya, and still others by karma, or even by listening alone to what others have taught them. Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 24 and 25 shlokas, 24th and 25th shlokas. It is easy to see how these verses seem to suggest that there are many paths taught in the Gita and that each one independently has the capacity to lead us to the final goal of liberation. We shall try to demonstrate as the text proceeds that this is a serious misreading of the Gita. 1.2 Doubts regarding terms used in the Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, verse 5.2, the unity of Sankhya and Yoga is insisted upon. Do these terms have the same meaning as the philosophical systems that go by these names? Apart from the possible confusion that might result from a superficial examination of the above mentioned verse, some of the individual words employed in the text itself carry different meanings in different contexts, and more than one word seems to have been used to indicate the same thing, thus opening up the possibility for further confusion. Some words like Sankhya, Yoga, Samadhi, etc., have associations with popular Indian philosophical systems. This has prompted the proponents of these various systems to claim that the particular path referred to in the Bhagavad Gita by a particular word commonly appearing in that school of thought has in fact been borrowed from that school and used by the other author of the Gita. For example, the description of the gunas, the qualities of nature, Prakriti, primordial nature, and its relation to Purusha, one's real self, as well as the five elements needed for karma, resembles what has been propounded in the Sankhya philosophical system. Similarly, the preparation for contemplation, dhyana, mentioned in the beginning of the sixth chapter of the Gita, resembles the tenets of the Patanjali school of yoga. And these arguments gets further support from the fact that the name Kapila, who is reputed to be the originator of the Sankhya school, appears in the Gita as one of the divine manifestations of the Supreme Being. Bhagavad Gita 10:26. Hence, some scholars have been prompted to claim that the Bhagavad Gita was originally a small text of Sankhya school and was enlarged and modified later by the interpolation of the concept of devotion into the original. Adding to the confusion, some scholars have argued that there is influence from the Bible to be found in the Gita. Some advocates of this idea have even gone so far as to prepare comprehensive lists of parallel and similar expressions in the Gita and Christian theology. We even come across speculation that Vyasa was in fact a Hebrew scholar during the early period of Christianity in Kerala, where the religion is said to have arrived in the first century AD, and that he composed the poem in Sanskrit on the model of the Bible for the benefit of the locals. Claims are also not lacking that the Gita borrowed the concept of devotion from Buddhism, presumably from texts like the Lankavatara Sutra. With reference to the above surmises, a general rebuttal can be made as follows. When one finds parallel concepts found in various scriptural and philosophical texts, no right thinking person need be surprised if similar or even identical views or expressions appear either in those texts or in the common pronouncements of two different sages, each being completely unfamiliar with and unrelated to the other. Truth is one and reveals itself in its real nature to the wise, though each one of them, after having received their revelation, may differ in the way they narrate it, translating their insights through their own mind and expressing within the limitations of language, an experience which is beyond all words. Hence, if two great religious leaders express similar views concerning reality, the question of borrowing or plagiarism need not necessarily be assumed. Examination of various views 1.3 that the Vedic religion stood in no need to borrow the concept of devotion has been well established by a number of researchers. Therefore, there is no particular purpose to be served here in reviving the topic again. Although the Upanishads, with a few exceptions such as the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, do not specifically use the word bhakti, devotion, the concepts of devotion and surrender are clearly seen even in the Rig Veda. The interested reader can consult Professor Hiriyanna's discussion of bhakti in the Vedas. He is in his work Outlines of Indian Philosophy 1932 published. Since the Gita follows the Vedic tradition closely, anyone who is approaching the teaching of the Gita without any preconceived ideas need not be concerned that the divine teacher of this sacred song, nor its author, traditionally taken as Vyasa, had to borrow ideas from either the Sankhya school, the Yoga school, Christianity, or any of the Buddhist schools. Especially because the Sankhya system was somewhat antagonistic to the Vedic tradition, and Buddhism is absolutely opposed to the Vedas. When examining the Sankhya system, it should be seen in the first instance that nobody is certain which particular text of the Sankhya school constitutes the original source text for the system. Doubts have been expressed that the set of aphorisms commonly ascribed to the sage Kapila, who may have been composition of Vijnana Bhikshu from a verse in the Srimad Bhagavata. It looks as though long before Kapila, the original system was there, and he, considered as an incarnation of Vishnu, only revived it. And even though the commentary entitled Yukti Deepika mentions the names of a number of thinkers of the Sankhya school, some of whom also get mentioned in the text like the Mahabharata, the ancient texts of these authors are now all lost to us. In addition, among the extant texts available to us, controversy exists as to which of two the Sankhya Karikas of Ishwara Krishna or the aphorisms of Kapila is the earlier one. Some doubts even exist as to whether or not the name Kapila referred to a female scholar, the mother of Asuri, as one of the well known thinkers of the school. As to the observation that both of these texts, the Sankhya Karikas and the aphorisms of Kapila, have been influenced by Vedanta, there seems to be little doubt. From the description of the Sankhya school appearing in various places in the Mahabharata, the influence of monistic Vedanta gets further support. Various other texts such as the Charaka Samhita, the Sushruta Samhita, and some Smritis and Puranas like Bhagavata have taken notice of the teachings of the Sankhya school and have also mentioned a number of Sankhya teachers. Chinese sources report that there were 18 Sankhya schools. Early Sankhya quoted on page 1353 of volume 2 of the History of Dharmashastra. On a careful examination of the vast literature that is still available to us, it may be extremely difficult to assert whether the Sankhya school was originally a materialistic philosophy, Pradhanavada, denying God and religion, or to view it as a system more similar to Vedanta. At this point, it becomes anyone's guess whether the Sankhya in its original form contained Vedanta concepts into which a materialistic philosophy was incorporated, or whether the school was an atheistic system into which Vedantic concepts were interpolated later. While many such theories get started on certain weak assumptions, they are, at least up till now, not based on any firm, indubitable evidence. Even conceding that the Sankhya school can lay claim to antiquity, why it should necessarily be presumed to have preceded the Bhagavad Gita in any one's guess, in as much as the Gita's exact dating is still being disputed among scholars. The difficulty in understanding the correct nature of some of these ancient systems can be illustrated from an examination of the word anvikshi. Anvikshi, investigation, penetration, one of the earliest terms used in Indian literature to designate the concept of philosophy. The ancient laws of India have included this among the subjects for study and practice by the rulers, and the expression is understood to include Sankhya, Yoga, and Lokayata philosophies, as mentioned in Kautilya's Arthashastra, wherein he eulogies it as most beneficial to the world. It keeps the mind steady and firm in weal and woe alike, and bestows excellence of foresight, speech, and action. It is light to all kinds of knowledge, receptacle of all virtues, Kautilya's Arthashastra. While some commentators have interpreted the term as referring to logic, others have described it as referring to the knowledge of the inner self, Adhyatma Vidya, and still others have explained it as the logic that leads to the knowledge of the self. Taking the term as referring to the Lokayata philosophy would imply atheism or materialism, And because of its being grouped with the other two schools of Sankhya and Yoga, one can surmise that even the Yoga school in its ancient form may have been also atheistic. On the same ground, it is doubtful whether the extant Yoga Sutras attributed to Patanjali, constitute the original source material for the Yoga philosophy. For example, in some early texts, we come across a system of yoga with only six limbs. For these philosophical systems to get established and accepted in their final forms, it is reasonable to expect that many previous efforts laid the foundation, and the accepted present version is more or less a codified whole of the earlier fragments. For instance, the extant Vedanta Sutras are reported to have been preceded by a few earlier attempts. We see mention being made of two Brahma Sutras that perhaps were earlier to the Vedanta Sutras, as we know it today in the celebrated commentaries by Bhagavan Shankaracharya. This fact becomes reinforced by an examination of Shankaracharya's commentaries on verse 13.4 of the Geetha and on the Gaudapada Karika 2.32. Turning our attention to Buddhism, it should be noted that there still exists controversy regarding precisely what it was that Gautama Buddha actually taught. In a commentary on the text Sarvadarshana Sangraha, it is stated that Vatsyayana taught this Vidya, which is Nyaya Vidya, based on the perception, scriptures, and inference. What is now being accepted in the name of that religion and as the Buddha's philosophy is a version developed by way of various logical systems and yogic practices put forth by much later advocates of Buddhism. The first literary work now available appeared after a considerable lapse of time after the nirvana of the Buddha in what is considered as the core teaching of the Buddha. The main insistence seems to be on social ethics concerning the mechanics of and the relief from suffering, dukkha. This gives rise to the doubt as to whether this was all that he taught to his disciples or was there something more. And this doubt can be extended to the revelation concerning God and other spiritual matters, these issues being lost in the course of time, ignored, or merely dismissed as being too metaphysical in nature before they were actually recorded. Whatever the case may be, some evidence has been adduced to show the similarity between Sankhya and Buddhism and that both of them could have had a common source in the Upanishads. H.B. Shastri has even suggested the possible origin for Buddhism in Sankhya philosophy, based on some evidence that two teachers of Gautama Buddha, Arada Kalana, Arada Kalana, and Uddaka Ramaputta were strong votaries of Sankhya philosophy. This theory may have been based on a description of a discussion found in the Buddha Charita of Ashwagosha between the Buddha and Arada, whose views seem to resemble the tenets found in Sankhya. It should also be kept in mind that the historicity of Ashwagosha is also not being questioned, not beyond question. Regardless of what final conclusions are made regarding Buddhism, the claim that atheistic Buddhism could have been source of devotion for the Vedic religion can be held in abeyance for the time being as a mere flight of imagination. On the contrary, basing this statement on Taranatha's account of Buddhism in Tibetan, Dr. Karn has this to say: he, Nagarjuna, was a pupil of the Brahmana Rahula Bhadra, who himself was a Mahayanist. This Brahmana was much indebted to the sage Krishna and still more to Ganesha. This quasi historical notice, reduced to its less allegorical expression, means that Mahayanism is much indebted to the Bhagavad Gita and more even to Shaivism, Manual of Indian Buddhism, page 122. In the text Doctrines of Maitreyanatha, Professor G. Tucci has stated the following: it, the Mahayana Sutras prior to Nagarjuna, is an enormous literature which shows how characteristic Hindu ideas were creeping into Buddhism. Again, external Brahmanical influence in this rise of Mahayana has been surmised by some scholars. Example Kern, Max Muller, Keith, Checherbatsky, and others. Gautama Buddha himself, according to Buddhist sources, was not the first Buddha, nor were anti Vedic concepts propounded by him for the first time. Next, we shall discuss in the next session Geetha and other systems. We shall see in the next session. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Sadguru Charanarpitamastu, Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu, Sajjana Santu Nirbhayaha. Om Tat Sat, Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.